the turn of the millennium, Pokémon wasn't just a video game franchise, it was a cross-cultural juggernaut, and as a 12-year-old Nintendo fan, I was fully on board. Though I've wavered in and out of the additional trappings, I've always maintained an appreciation for the core game series. But I have to wonder, why is that? Because I did not appreciate RPG mechanics. As a kid, I never had the patience for the tedious back and forth of turn-based fighting and the frustration of random encounters. These days, I can recognise the intricacies of RPG design, but while they now have my respect, most RPG games have never really clicked with me as a player, and yet Pokémon always has.
So what separates Pokémon? What makes it special? I think it's a sense of discovery, finding new areas to explore, finding new creatures to capture, train, and befriend. And I think this is a core principle of Pokémon as a series. I mean, if you took that away, what would you have left? Well, what you'd have left would be Pokémon Stadium for the Nintendo 64.
There's no mistaking Pokémon Stadium for anything else but a battle simulator. It's right there in the title. For gamers like me, who saw Pokémon battles as a means to an end, this wasn't very appealing. But for battle enthusiasts, the spectacle of big screen action must have been well worth the price of admission. However, I think that even the most ardent Poké battler gets a raw deal here. Though the battle system of the original games is replicated faithfully, it's missing a few significant facets, all caused by the removal of the external game context. Number 1. Pokémon don't earn experience from battling. No leveling up, no evolution, no sense of progress. Pokémon Trainer becomes Pokémon Retainer. Number 2. You can't catch new Pokémon. That addictive rush of pursuing and capturing a new Pokémon type is not here. You can be rewarded with Pokémon as battle prizes, but that's hardly the same thing. Number 3. Your Pokémon status will reset after every battle. Not a big deal, but it plays havoc with the PP scale, the number of times a move can be made. Powerful moves are given low PPs for a reason, but if you start afresh for each battle, there's no real need to moderate their use. But number 4 is the biggie. There's no items. A significant strategic element of the battle system is just not there. While this does prevent potion dependence, it makes all the moves with status effects ridiculously overpowered. If your Pokémon gets paralysed or put to sleep, then that's it. No Paralyze Heal, no Poké Flute, no Antidote, no Hope. While the duration of sleep moves was slightly reduced to compensate, their effect is still too devastating. In short, Pokémon Stadium takes the battle system of the original games and makes it incomplete, unbalanced, and pointless. And it's not a good sign to begin with, when you can describe a 64 title by getting a Game Boy game and taking things out. I'm very tempted to call this game lazy, but it's not. It's clear that a lot of effort went into this product. Just modelling and animating all 151 Pokémon is no small task, but they're all here, even the ones that no one would miss, and they look really good. They have a roundness and softness that was quite uncommon in the days when polygons were countable. Aside from the blurry bitmap backgrounds behind each menu, this game is still quite a looker. But Stadium's most alluring feature is connectivity with red, blue and yellow for the transfer pack, an accessory which connects to the back of your controller and sends data from a Game Boy cartridge to the 64. It came packed in with Pokémon Stadium, and with good reason, as it was clearly designed for this game. Very few other games made use of the transfer pack, and usually just to unlock bonus content for gamers who shelled out for an extra game, kind of like an early form of pay-to-play content. Whereas in Pokémon Stadium, the transfer pack is an integrated part of the experience. It more or less assumes that you have a copy of one of the Game Boy games, but with combined sales of 45 million, that's a fair assumption. While you are actively encouraged to import your own Pokémon for use in battles, the game does offer rental Pokémon, a smorgasbord of almost every Pokémon, but their moves are fixed, and their levels are capped at 50. Still, when I played this game as a kid, I used rental Pokémon like 90% of the time, as it gave me a chance to try out all the Pokémon I couldn't catch, and I just didn't see the point in transferring my Pokémon over if they wouldn't gain experience and almost never met the particular rules of a tournament. This is the way battles are structured in this game. Either slog through the gym leaders and their underlings, or compete in a cup with very specific rules. And both modes are pretty disappointing. Your battles are only punctuated by these rather bland still images. And aside from arena and music, these modes do nothing to distinguish themselves from the free battle mode, which is much more customizable and just as satisfying. All these tournaments provide to me is an interminable series of Pokémon battles. So what does this game offer for those of us who this doesn't appeal to? Well, there's Game Boy Tower, which allows you to play your Pokémon games on the big screen, if you don't have, a Super Game Boy, which puts every Game Boy game on the big screen. And there's also Professor Oak's Lab, which provides a great tool to manage your Pokémon data. A great boon for all the Pokemaniacs out there, and apparently so well received that Nintendo even turned this into a full software release in one of their more inexplicable moments. With these tools, gamers had the power to mass exchange Pokemon, doing away with those long link cable trading sessions. Before I had a Game Boy, I used to use this to swap with my brother, but now that I've got free copies of Pokemon Red, I can just swap with myself. And Pokémon Stadium provides the fastest way to do it. Also, you can find out everything you'd ever need to know about your Pokemon and their moves. With sortable categories and easy ways to swap between boxes, it's all very convenient, but I'd advise caution against reckless moving, as several of my Pokemon fell victim to improper transfer pack connections. It's all fun and games until somebody loses an Ivysaur. And speaking of fun and games, we end our look at Pokémon Stadium with the Pokémon Kids Club. It's a set of 9 minigames which has you competing in button tapping. Tapping at a certain time, alternate tapping, tapping a specified button, and just tapping. I don't know about these. I mean, there's a whole game based on Magikarp's Splash move. And if that's too enthralling for you, how about a game based on Harden? I guess it's fitting. Time-wasting moves for time-wasting games. Well, they're not all that bad. Ekhan's Hoop Hurl was notable for its use of an atypical controller configuration, where you hold the left and the centre prongs. This was actually promoted as one of the main control styles when the system was first introduced, and this makes the three-pronged absurdity that is the 64 controller seem much more rational. And it's also notable amongst these minigames because you don't just tap buttons, there's actually skill and thought involved. There's really only 2 other minigames like it, and they're easily the best of the bunch. Clefairy Says is a memorise game, where you have to repeat a dance of up to 10 directions. And in Sushi Go Round, you compete against other Lickitungs to rack up the highest sushi restaurant bill. Its gameplay is a combination of luck, strategy, and screaming Japanese man. I really like this one. Overall though, Pokémon Stadium is a flawed package. I suppose these faults could have been overlooked for Pokémon's first console outing, but it wasn't the first, at least not in the Western world. It was pipped at the post by Pokémon Snap, an on-rails photography adventure. And no, I'm not making that up. I remember at the time that Stadium was being touted as the first true Pokémon experience on the 64, with Snap deemed irrelevant as a spin-off game. Well, I may be 10 years too late, and have a completely biased opinion, but I've got to say that I think what Snap offers is a lot closer to the key values of the Pokémon franchise. It has exploration, well, somewhat, and capturing, well, somewhat, but most importantly of all, Pokémon Snap is an adventure.
And ultimately, this is why Pokémon Stadium has just never made much of an impression on me. It's a good piece of software, but that's all it is. And I want more from the games that I play. I want experience.